No matter your opinion of Donald J. Trump's tenure as 45th President of the United States, there's no denying the fact that he's one of the most polarizing, divisive, and consequential presidents in American history, no matter which side of the aisle you claim to be on. Thus, I wanted to take a deeper dive into the overarching impact on Trump and what his presidency means for the next generation now and into the future. Thus, I enlisted the expertise of Robert Ted Gucci Jr., an associate professor, senior lecturer, media commentator on Trump, the media, and American politics at Lancaster University. He joined me this week to provide some insight on how we should view Trump's tenure in the Oval Office. I'm Kevin McShane. Let's have this conversation. Absolutely. So, Robert, if you're ready, I'll welcome you to the program, and we're excited to talk to you about President Trump and the 2020 presidential race. So great to see you this afternoon, and thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Robert, I'm wondering if I could just start you off by generally asking you just a broader question of what do you think has been the most impactful decision or policy mandate that the president has undertaken as president?
Well, I mean, I think one of the most important aspects to his presidency has been his treatment of immigration policy. We've seen immense amounts of effort and energy put into not just trying to build a wall or building a wall, but sending military and violence to the southern border with Mexico. That looked at deportation in ways that we hadn't looked at it under Barack Obama. I mean, certainly we knew that Barack Obama was big into deportation, but Donald Trump's approach through military and through his rhetoric, I think, set the tone in the 2016 campaign of a us versus them sort of mentality, and bringing in a lot of fear. And I think that we've seen that issue of immigration and his treatment of immigration and his treatment of immigrants, certainly in the treatment of the institution of the presidency and by the institution of the presidency. The presidency is not just one person, right? It's an institution, an organization around it. Has been very inhumane to the individual and to the collectives, whether immigration should be, a free border or not, and it should be free mobility or not. But all of this set that tone and created a landscape that I think really fueled policing in cities of protest, where we actually have border patrol, and we have militia and unnamed police and military hired guns arresting and beating U.S. citizens. And so I think that goes back a lot to the thing that probably got him elected in the first place, his anti-immigration position.
And I'm just curious, do you think his presidency has diminished America's standing on the world stage?
Well, I'm here in the United Kingdom, where the same, very similar populism, which has been spreading across Europe, has led to Brexit, where in January supposedly the UK is leaving the European Union. And that doesn't put the UK in a very good position. But we also have leaders in the UK that aren't as divisive with international neighbors. I mean, certainly with the continent, relationships need to be a little bit different. We're just so close, and we don't have the economy, we don't have the military power, we don't have all those things that the United States still contributes to in trying to be a world leader. So the United States was headed in this direction, I think, a long time ago, before the War on Terror, which itself was a a hegemonic movement across the world, run by some of the same populism that just didn't creep out until about 10 or so years later. But yeah, I mean, I think that this was a long time coming, unfortunately, and I think that I don't normally speak this way, but I do think that the president has kind of looked like a joke a lot of the time, even though the things that we're talking about and that he's doing and talking about, and again, that the institution is allowing him to do, and the citizens that voted him in are allowing him to do, there's nothing funny about it at all. So, whereas we had, George W. Bush, who spoke over himself and had his Bushisms and all these different things, and also led illegal and unpopular war, right? International war. This has been different still. He hasn't had, Donald Trump hasn't had to drop the amount of bombs that Bush did, but he does it through the way he treats people and the way that he treats international partners, I think.
And how do you think he's fundamentally changed the state of American politics?
Well, I think he's unveiled the hatred that's already there. And I think Barack Obama, I deal with a lot of things with journalism and how journalists are dealing with Trump and the changing political landscape. And I do think Barack Obama got away with 8 years of, pretty cush 8 years with journalists anyway. There weren't major scandals or snafus that we can even remember. And so that was a different time. And Donald Trump came in right away starting to say that he can assault women and does it all the time, and it's a fun and good thing to do. And everything just started to snowball after those tapes were released. And it just has become a circus. And that may not be the most scholarly term, but there is a circus mentality to this type of spectacle that we're seeing. And I think the influence is that it's actually showing that this whole time, everything's been a bit of smoke and mirrors, right? I mean, American democracy shouldn't have anywhere inside it a militarized police force the way that it does, and a direct connection between the executive branch and the military to the degree that American citizens are being arrested, shot at, beaten they're murdered by the police or by the military simply for protesting. And again, protesting isn't just standing peacefully on a sidewalk. Protesting can expand into other things that we might call looting and other derogatory terms. But to some degree, that should be a freedom within reason. And that's where people, I think, disagree a lot. But what I think Donald Trump's done essentially is put on the table the things that have been our sins this whole time. And he's shown us that there's an infrastructure to support those sins.
And let's talk about the coronavirus. Certainly, it's on the mind of everyone. It's still a global pandemic. So I'm wondering your thoughts on when he said to not be afraid of the virus anymore, and then his behavior before and after he left the hospital after being diagnosed with the virus.
Yeah, I mean, he claims to be immune. He claims that he's, but he's also been immune from impeachment and immune from other aspects of oversight by the Senate, he thinks, and the American people. I think that Donald Trump is constantly focused on what Donald Trump wants. And it's going back to when we first were introduced to him as a political candidate. Americans might have known him before that as a celebrity or as a developer, failed or otherwise developer. And I think that when we were reintroduced to him as a politician, the people who took to him were those who liked his plain speech and a bit of his bad mouth. And so even in the face of a pandemic, right, it's fascinating to me how supporters are fine with kind of this wish-washing away of what is a really serious thing. I mean, it kept me shielded for 3 months. I didn't leave my house for 3 months here in England because I have respiratory challenges even before this, right? But that's because I'm also very fortunate to have a house and to have a job and to have these things that allowed me to have, while uncomfortable, something that I could survive. He doesn't seem to even recognize that, and it's the same sort of issue with other politicians in history who don't know how to spell potato, and Reagan didn't know how much a carton of milk was, and for those things that was kind of their downfall. Or Mike Dukakis running around in a tank, but also having his own ironies related to that, and that seemed to be their downfall. But for Donald Trump, he's got a golden goose. I mean, everything he touches turns into one of his buildings. So I don't know if the damage really from Donald Trump is that people continue to be drawn to Donald Trump, or that he's moving them away from any sort of scientific realities about the coronavirus and other issues. They seem to go where he wants to go, and are leaving science behind. And that's a big problem when we talk about other things in the world. So if we ever want to talk about climate change or global warming again, right? Our supporters, if he gets in for 4 more years, going to follow Donald Trump and whatever he says about it? Or are they going to even listen to science? So, I mean, I think there are larger issues here, larger symptoms here that he's shown through his behavior about the coronavirus.
And as you know, the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett are going on, and that'll certainly fundamentally change the direction of the Supreme Court when she is eventually confirmed, because the Republicans have the majority. So I'm wondering your thoughts on the whole appointment of Amy Coney Barrett and how that may change the landscape of American politics.
Well, for a conservative, I mean, this must be an amazing experience to have a president in 4 years put in three associate justices. I mean, this has to be just, it is almost unbelievable. And it's unbelievable that journalists and citizens are so focused on so many other things right now that the Supreme Court thing, it's going on live on C-SPAN and on Reuters and other things, right? But it doesn't seem to be a bit of conversation. And I think that's, a choice that was made to bring in, white suburban female voters, or to solidify kind of that vote. And so it's kind of a political move. And we don't know what's going to happen over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of this young person being on the court, because I do agree that I think that this will be taken care of here in the next week or so. But but we're also seeing people like John Roberts, who was put on and was expected to be some neoconservative, and while some people might believe that he is, hasn't really fallen in line with what the detractors thought he was going to be, and sometimes comes out as more of the center or moderate. And people thought it was constantly going to be just a right-wing ballot, down the ballot decision. So I think there's some concern about stacking the court, absolutely. But we also have a history where when we thought there was a stacked court, things don't come down to that political position. They tend to come down as they would through debate on the court. I think the real issue also here is how federal courts have been stacked, right? And that's going to have an influence on what the Supreme Court sees and hears. And so I think the federal court system is something that most Americans don't really understand. I think it's immense and huge and complicated, and isn't really talked about in journalism in ways where people can easily dissect what that is. And so they've moved to the Supreme Court as being the end all be all. Sometimes it is. But there's a whole infrastructure that gets people to the Supreme Court. And I think that that's where it's been stacked. And that's where we're going to see the biggest influence over the next generation.
And let's talk about healthcare. Obviously, Donald Trump is trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. He has a case in front of the Supreme Court on the 10th of November, a week after the election. So I'm just wondering your thoughts on the future of healthcare in America and how we may look at it now and after the election.
Well, what's really sad about not having really robust debates or a quote unquote normal campaign because of COVID is we don't really even know what Joe Biden's position is on healthcare unless you're a big Joe Biden supporter. So we haven't had good conversations where in the past you'd say, here's my plan A, B, and C. The other person would say, here's my plan A, B, and C. What you hear this time is, we're going to get rid of everything. And on the other side, everybody needs healthcare. And it's been boiled down to such sound bites, and I'm being dramatic here, but it's being boiled down to swallowable, bits of information, because the whole climate of what's going on right now in politics is just been eaten up by the spectacle, by concerns of coronavirus. But if there's any moment when we should see the value of healthcare, it is certainly in the middle of a pandemic, and it's just shocking that isn't the first and foremost conversation right now. I certainly think issues of race and policing should be up there as well. But this one is kind of looking us right in the eye and telling us who we are as a society when people are getting these astronomical bills or are dying from what on one side of the fence conservatives say is just a bad flu, but the others say is a really serious virus that could just do us in. And so I think that if we can get through this election, depending on who's in the White House, we might have an opportunity to talk about healthcare. And I think that what they need to do is bring back those images from March and April of people on ventilators, of crowded hospitals, and maybe use the fear of God to indicate to people this is the condition that some people look like they're in every single day. For other reasons than coronavirus, because they don't have access to adequate health care, or if they do have access to it, they're left broke for the rest of their lives, simply just to be alive.
And I've got two more questions for you. The first having to do with police brutality and police reform. I'm just wondering your thoughts on the state of that discussion going forward in America.
Well, I think the defund movement, right, would be really helpful with visuals. I mean, I think it would be helpful for Americans and their own communities to see what weaponry their officers have. So there are lots of things that need to be pulled apart in policing, records of how police operate, the procedures and rationales, policing patrols, how and why people are characterized for, during particular stops. But let's just look at the arsenal. I remember right after 9/11, when I was a journalist, we would write all these stories about just local, average, normal communities that were getting massive amounts of federal dollars to protect, these obscure parts of the country from terrorists. That money went into military-grade weaponry. Surplus was another thing that made its way into police stations. I worked at a university in the U.S. that, for all intents and purposes, had a tank. Didn't have a big gun barrel coming out of it, but it was military-grade bulletproof. I mean, what does a university need with that? Why do universities need military grade weapons? And the answer is, well, other people have weapons, so we need to have weapons to protect ourselves. I mean, that's just a fundamental difference between different segments of society. But we should actually look, write down and show pictures and have inventory of what our police have and ask, why do we need all of these weapons that are being used against Americans? We don't have terrorists parachuting in like it's Red Dawn. So why does some obscure place have military level weapons? Because we know from policing that along with being part of that institution come ideologies that that are extremely dangerous when those weapons are in people's hands in very tense situations. So I think visual communication here would be vital, because I think people would be astounded the types of things that police have that they are using or threatening to use against us.
And then my final question for you is, what do you anticipate is going to happen in just a little over 3 weeks and with the election? And assuming Donald Trump does lose on November the 3rd, what do you think about the future of the Republican Party?
Well, on November 3rd or 4th, or whenever we're allowed to have all of the ballots counted, which makes us go back to maybe we shouldn't try and do this all in one day. Donald Trump's going to win either way, at least for a short period of time. Either he's going to get into office because of the ballots in the Electoral College that's counted. However, they're going to decide that this year, if the Electoral College is going to fall in line with popular vote or not, which would be, again, amazing. He's going to fight Biden and the Democrats by taking this into court and spending, half of Joe Biden's term in the court fighting the results. I mean, he's pretty much told us he won't leave the White House, but some of this is just being mouthy. But he won't leave the White House in spirit if he's got everything caught up in the court system the entire time. If he wins, I think we're going to see again a return to where he started from. Massive changes to immigration. I think naturalized citizens are going to be under threat. Unfortunately, I think that he might move in some of those directions against some of those individuals and those rights. And I think if Joe Biden gets in and Donald Trump goes back to New York and goes back to being a celebrity or developer, there's a lot of stuff that's, again, been unveiled that Joe Biden's going to have to answer to, right? How did we get into this place in the first place? What are the biggest issues that need to be cleaned up? Do we need to really go against every single policy that Donald Trump put out there? And if we do, what does that mean for either bringing us together or dividing us even further apart? Because if Joe Biden goes in there and unravels everything Donald Trump did, that Joe Biden's going to only have, he'll only be a one-term president. We have a lot of angry people on both sides of the aisle out there, unfortunately, in America. And Joe Biden's going to have to figure out how to bring everybody onto the same table to get along and to move us in one direction together.
Hey, Robert, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes today to have a wide-ranging and diverse discussion about the 2020 election and the future of American politics. Really enjoyed our discussion, and I want to thank you for being here today.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic.